I never thought I'd be the type of person to snoop through my husband's pockets. But there I was, hands trembling as I unfolded a small piece of paper I'd found while doing laundry. My name is Lila, and that crumpled note changed everything. Second chances come at a price. Are you ready to pay it? The handwriting wasn't familiar, and neither was the faint scent of perfume that clung to the paper. Greg had been acting strange lately. Working late, taking private calls, being oddly protective of his phone. But I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. "Hey, honey." Greg's voice echoed through our house, making me jump. I quickly stuffed the note back into his jacket pocket, my heart racing. You wouldn't believe the day I had. I watched him walk into our laundry room, his realtor smile perfectly in place. That same smile he'd given me when I'd asked about the late-night texts last week. "Oh yeah." I managed to keep my voice steady. "Tell me about it." He launched into a story about a difficult client, but I barely heard him. Instead, I noticed how he subtly checked his jacket pockets, his expression flickering for just a moment when he felt the paper was still there. "Mom called earlier," he said, changing the subject. "She wants us over for dinner tomorrow night." "I have a client meeting," I lied, needing time to think. "Maybe next week?" "Lila." His tone shifted, carrying that hint of disapproval he'd picked up from his mother. "You know how important family dinner is to her. Can't you reschedule?" I looked at my husband of 5 years, really looked at him, and wondered when we'd become such strangers. "Sure," I said finally. "I'll move things around." He kissed my cheek, but it felt like a stranger's lips against my skin. As he left the room, I pulled out my phone and texted my sister Nora. "Need to talk." "Something's wrong." The response came immediately. "Wine night. My place. 8 p.m. I stared at my reflection in the washing machine's door, the distorted image somehow fitting for how I felt. Whatever that note meant, whatever Greg was hiding, I had a feeling our carefully constructed life was about to unravel. Nora's apartment always felt like a sanctuary, but tonight even the familiar comfort of her worn leather couch couldn't ease my nerves. I clutched my wine glass, the red liquid trembling as I recounted finding the note. "And you're sure it wasn't just some business thing?" Nora asked, but her expression told me she didn't believe that any more than I did. "You should have seen how he checked his pocket," I said. Like he was making sure his secret was still safe. The words felt bitter on my tongue. My phone buzzed. Edith's name flashed on the screen, making my stomach clench. "Speaking of secrets," I muttered, showing Nora the screen. "Your mother-in-law has impeccable timing as always," Nora said, rolling her eyes. "What does she want now?" I opened the message. "Darling, I've been thinking about what we discussed at dinner. I know this wonderful fertility specialist. Greg mentioned you've been resistant to starting a family. Perhaps we could discuss this over lunch tomorrow." "Jesus," Nora whispered, reading over my shoulder. "She really doesn't quit, does she? Greg told her we were trying?" My voice cracked. "We agreed that was private. We agreed to wait." "Of course he did," Nora said. "When has Greg ever stood up to his mother?" Another message popped up, this time from Greg. "Mom says you're not responding to her messages. Don't be rude, Lila. She's just trying to help." I stood up abruptly, pacing Nora's living room. "Help. She's trying to control our lives, and he's letting her." "No, he's helping her." "Lila," Nora said softly, "when was the last time you and Greg made a decision without Edith's input?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought about the house we bought, in Edith's preferred neighborhood, my career choices, which Edith constantly criticized. Even our wedding, planned entirely by Edith. "Oh God," I whispered, sinking back onto the couch. "I'm living someone else's life, aren't I?" My phone buzzed again. Another message from Greg. "We need to talk when you get home. Mom's really upset." Nora reached over and squeezed my hand. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stared at my phone, at the messages demanding my compliance, and felt something shift inside me. Whatever that note meant, whatever Greg was hiding, I was done being the perfect passive daughter-in-law. I wasn't planning to eavesdrop. I'd only stopped by Edith's house to drop off the casserole dish from Sunday dinner when I heard Greg's voice from the study. Raw and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "I can't tell her, Mom. You don't understand what this would do to us." I froze in the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Gregory." Edith's voice carried that familiar manipulative softness. "Dr. Harrison says these feelings about fatherhood are completely normal. But hiding them from Lila isn't healthy." The casserole dish nearly slipped from my hands. "Dr. Harrison? Therapy?" My husband had been seeing a therapist about fatherhood fears, and I was learning about it from his mother? Every time she brings up having kids, I feel like I'm suffocating, Greg continued. What if I turn out like Dad? What if your father's mistakes aren't yours to bear? Edith interrupted. But this secrecy needs to stop. Either tell Lila about the therapy or I will. I backed away slowly, but my heel caught the edge of the Persian rug. The dish clattered to the floor, shattering the silence. Lila! Greg appeared in the doorway, his face draining of color. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. When were you going to tell me about Dr. Harrison? Edith appeared behind him, her expression a perfect mask of concern. Oh, darling, we were just discussing. Stop. I held up my hand. I want to hear it from Greg. He stepped forward, reaching for me, but I moved back. Lila, please. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign. By letting your mother be part of your therapy while keeping your wife in the dark? You don't understand. You're right, I don't understand. I cut him off. I don't understand why my husband can tell his mother everything, but can't be honest with me. I don't understand why every major decision in our marriage involves her input. And I really don't understand who wrote that note about second chances in your jacket pocket. The silence that followed was deafening. Greg's face went from pale to ashen, and behind him, Edith's perfect mask finally cracked. What note? They asked in unison, and in that moment, I knew I'd stumbled onto something much bigger than therapy sessions. The email from my boss sat unopened in my inbox for 10 minutes before I could bring myself to read it. 3 weeks of working from home, while barely functioning, wasn't sustainable, and we both knew it. You're one of our best advisors, Lila, she'd written. But your clients need someone who's fully present. Take some time. Sort things out. Your position will be here when you're ready. I closed my laptop just as my phone lit up with Edith's name. Again, 15 missed calls in 3 days since I'd overheard their conversation. Greg had moved into the guest room, and the silence between us was deafening. A text from an unknown number popped up. We should talk about Greg. Coffee at Riverside Cafe tomorrow? Celeste. Celeste Monroe. Greg's old friend from college who'd mysteriously disappeared from our lives right after our wedding. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing. 11 a.m. You're making a mistake, Greg's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway of our home office, looking exhausted. Celeste doesn't know anything about our life. Funny, I said, setting my phone down. That's exactly how I felt when I found out your mother knew more about your therapy than I did. I needed someone to talk to. And it couldn't be me? Your wife. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. You don't understand the pressure. The expectations. My father. Stop. I stood up, gathering my papers. I'm tired of hearing about expectations. What about my expectations of honesty? Of partnership? Is that why you're talking to Celeste? To get back at me? Something in his tone made me pause. Fear. Real fear. Why are you so worried about what Celeste might tell me? He stepped forward, reaching for my arm, but I moved away. Lila, please. Whatever she says. Will it be the truth? I asked quietly. Because that's all I want, Greg. The truth. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Tomorrow's coffee with Celeste wasn't just about getting answers anymore. It was about finding out exactly how many lies my marriage was built on. Celeste's hands shook as she slid the manila folder across the cafe table. I found these in Greg's old storage unit last week. He never cleared it out after the wedding. My coffee sat untouched as I opened the folder. Inside were therapy notes, not from Dr. Harrison, but from sessions 3 years ago. Before our marriage. My vision blurred as I read. Patient expresses severe anxiety about repeating father's pattern of emotional abandonment. Suggests possible solution. Finding partner willing to prioritize family over career. There's more, Celeste said quietly. The next page was a letter, dated 2 weeks before our wedding. Greg's handwriting. If she won't give up her career for family, I'll have to end it. Mom's right, some sacrifices are necessary for the Hartwell legacy. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too warm. Why are you showing me this now? Celeste's eyes filled with tears. Because I was her, the one before you. I chose my career and Greg. She swallowed hard. Edith made sure I disappeared from their lives. I should have warned you. My phone buzzed. A text from Greg. Where are you? Mom's worried. Come home. Home. The word felt hollow now. He's not a bad person, Celeste said. But he'll never choose you over his mother's expectations. Never. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. Lila, wait. But I was already moving, the folder clutched to my chest like a shield. I drove home in a daze, parking crooked in our driveway. Inside, I found Greg and Edith in the kitchen, their conversation stopping abruptly when I entered. "Darling," Edith started, "we were just discussing." I slapped the folder on the counter. "Were you discussing this? Your master plan to mold me into the perfect Hartwell wife." Greg's face went white as he recognized the papers. "Where did you?" "Celeste says hello." I cut him off. "Funny how history repeats itself, isn't it?" Edith stepped forward, reaching for the folder. "Now, Lila, let's not be dramatic." "Don't." My voice cracked. "Don't you dare try to manipulate this away. I'm done." The silence that followed felt like a death knell for my marriage. The pregnancy test sat on my bathroom counter like a time bomb. 2 pink lines. Clear as day. 3 weeks after finding Greg's therapy notes, and now this. I'd been staying at Nora's, ignoring Greg's calls and Edith's increasingly desperate messages. But this changed everything. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach as I slid down against the cool tile wall. My phone buzzed. "Greg again. We need to talk. Please. I can explain everything." Before I could respond, another message appeared. "Mom's in the hospital. Stress-induced panic attack. She's asking for you." Of course she was. Even now, they were trying to pull me back in. I called Celeste instead. "A baby." She sounded worried. "Lila, you need to be careful." When I told Greg I was pregnant, my heart stopped. "What?" A long pause. "I lost it at 8 weeks. The stress of everything." Greg blamed my work schedule. Edith said it was God's way of showing me I wasn't fit to be a Hartwell. The bathroom suddenly felt like a prison cell. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Would it have made a difference?" Her voice cracked. "Some wounds you never really heal from." My doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the window, I saw Greg's car in the driveway. "I have to go," I whispered, ending the call. I opened the door to find Greg looking worse than I'd ever seen him. "Mom's stable," he said before I could ask. "But the doctor said she needs to avoid stress." His eyes fixed on my face. "We need to fix this, Lila. For everyone's sake." "Fix this?" I stepped back. "Like you tried to fix Celeste?" His face went pale. "She told you. About the baby? The one your mother convinced her she didn't deserve." My voice shook. "Yeah, she told me. That was different." "No." I cut him off, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. "It wasn't." His eyes caught the movement, widening with realization. "Are you?" The hope in his voice made me sick. Because I knew what came next, Edith's influence, the pressure to conform, the slow erosion of everything I was. "Yes," I said quietly. "But this time you won't get to decide what kind of mother I'll be." The hospital corridor felt endless as I walked toward Edith's room. 3 months pregnant, and here I was about to face the woman who'd orchestrated so much pain. I hadn't planned on coming, but Celeste's words kept echoing in my head. "If you don't confront her now, she'll haunt every decision you make about this baby." I found Edith sitting up in bed, looking smaller somehow. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, that familiar manipulative warmth spreading across her face. "Darling," she reached out her hands. "I knew you'd come." "Don't." I remained in the doorway. "I'm only here because I need you to understand something." "About the baby?" Her smile turned knowing. "Greg told me. This is wonderful news. A fresh start for everyone." I laughed, the sound harsh against the sterile walls. "A fresh start? Like the one you denied Celeste?" Her face hardened. "That situation was different. Because she wouldn't bow to your vision of the perfect family?" I stepped closer. "Or because she actually stood up to you? I protected this family. You destroyed lives." I cut her off. "And now I understand why. Celeste told me about your own mother-in-law, about how she forced you to quit your law career." Edith's hands began to shake. "That's not relevant. It's everything. You're not protecting family legacy, Edith. You're perpetuating trauma. You ungrateful." She tried to sit up straighter, her monitor beeping faster. "After everything I've done." "For who?" I placed my hand on my stomach. "My child will never know your kind of love. The kind that demands surrender in exchange for acceptance." Greg appeared in the doorway, his face panicked. "Lila, stop." Her heart. "No." Edith's voice was steel. "Let her speak. Let her throw away everything we've built." I turned to Greg. "Tell her. Tell her about your therapy, about your fears. Or are you still letting her fight your battles?" The silence that followed was deafening. Greg looked between us, trapped between his mother's expectations and his own truth. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered finally. "Then don't," I said, walking toward the door. "But I won't let this cycle continue." Not with my child. Edith's monitor beeped frantically as I left, but I didn't look back. Some legacies aren't worth preserving. 5 years passed like a dream. Oliver's laughter echoed through our small apartment as he chased his toy cars across the hardwood floors. My son, all curly hair and bright eyes, untouched by the shadows of the past. The doorbell rang. Celeste stood there, looking nervous. "Greg's father died last week," she said without preamble. I invited her in, watching Oliver play as we talked. "How is he?" "Struggling. Edith's apparently trying to sell the family home." Greg finally stood up to her, told her he wouldn't follow in his father's footsteps. She paused. "He's in therapy again. Real therapy this time." I nodded, feeling an unexpected lightness. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "Mom!" Oliver called out. "Park time. Give me a minute, sweetheart." I started, but then I saw her through the window. Edith, standing by the playground across the street. "She's been asking about him," Celeste said softly. "Says she's changed." I watched my former mother-in-law, noticing how time had softened her edges. She looked smaller somehow, less threatening. But then I remembered the therapy notes, Celeste's lost baby, all the lives shaped by her need for control. "Some changes come too late," I said, gathering Oliver's jacket. "The cycle stops here." We took the back exit to a different park. As Oliver played, I thought about the note that started everything. Second chances come at a price. I'd thought it was about Greg's secrets. But maybe it was about my own journey, about the price of breaking free. My phone buzzed with a text from Greg. "Mom told me she saw you. I understand now if you say no, but I'd like to meet him someday. When you think it's right." "If you think it's right." I watched Oliver climb the jungle gym, confident and free. He'd never know the weight of expectations that had nearly crushed his parents. Never feel the need to conform to someone else's legacy. "Maybe someday," I texted back. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what to carry forward and what to leave behind. Oliver waved from the top of the slide, fearless and joyful. And in his smile, I saw the best kind of legacy, one we get to choose for ourselves.